Hey there! Welcome to Film in the Blank. My name's Ian. I watch a lot of movies. Here's everything I watched in the month. I started the month off with 1984's Paris, Texas, written by Sam Shepard and directed by Wim Wenders. As a recovering Texan, it's always great to see my home state brought to life so dynamically on screen. Director Wim Wenders and cinematographer Robbie Mueller shot the dusty landscapes of Texas with so much beauty and vibrancy that it gives the film a slightly otherworldly quality. That quality turns the film into a smoldering fairy tale where life may not turn out like you'd hoped, but that doesn't mean there isn't an air of magic lingering all around. It's an enigma of a film anchored wonderfully by the enthralling Harry Dean Stanton, and I love it so much. 5 stars. Up next, please welcome to the stage Anora, written and directed by Sean Baker. No film from last year enthralled me like Anora did. The performances are all powerhouses, the writing is crisp, refined, and thoughtful, and Sean Baker leveled up his direction somehow from 2 of my favorite films of all time, The Florida Project and Red Rocket. I'm thrilled people are starting to fall in line with Anora as the best picture of the year after winning Critics' Choice, PGA, and DGA, and she better be click-clacking her heels all the way to that Oscar next. 4.5 stars. Then my first of 3 truly chaotic Japanese horror films this month, 1997's Perfect Blue, written by Sadayuki Murai and directed by Satoshi Kon. Every now and then a filmmaker realizes animation isn't just for kids and family films and uses it to tell a new kind of film. In Perfect Blue's case, it's an animated slasher film with a hefty dose of psychological thriller mixed in. Following a former pop singer turned budding actress who is haunted by a murderous stalker, the film handles its ample twists and turns with panache and has a lot of fun with its gory, frenetic visuals along the way. Treat yourself to some fun and watch this if you haven't. 4 stars. Next, Japanese horror goes existential in 1964's Woman in the Dunes, written by Kobo Abe and directed by Hiroshi Teshigahara. This is a force of a film that starts off polite and regimented and morphs into something much more sinister and unkempt, all of which is smothered in insane shots of sand as a wild, untamed force of nature and oozing virus. You could read this film a number of different ways, as analyzing the gap between the upper class and working class, urban communities and rural communities, or more specifically to Japan, people who accept their assigned place in society and those who resist. I can't get over the disorienting music that sounds like it's scoring the movements of some massive, unseen monster lumbering around outside a frame. It's one of the most complete films I've seen in a while and an instant all-time fave. 5 stars. And wrapping up the Japanese horror trio is 1977's House, written by Chiho Katsura and directed by Nobuhiko Obayashi. It's wild a movie as chaotic and ferociously unhinged as House works this well. Its freak level is off the charts, but it finds a tone that's as goofy as it is endearing that holds every weird beat together. You're lulled into the spaced out world of the film, and then the humor and spooks sneak up and bite you on the ass. With its rabid following, I was terrified it wouldn't work for me, but it worked and then some. 4.5 stars. Next, a Saoirse Oscar hopeful that sadly fizzled out, The Outrun, written by Nora Fingscheidt and Amy Liptrot, and directed by Nora Fingscheidt. As we all know, when a woman in a movie goes through something, legally she has to dye her hair. I was worried that concept would be as surface deep as the film got, but it goes further. Saoirse's fantastic and holds your hand as you sit with her character's chaotic stop and start journey towards some semblance of peace through sobriety. It felt too meek at times and didn't milk enough from its potential, but I'm a fan. 3.5 stars. Then Joker Folie Adudu, aka Joker Folie Adu, written by Todd Phillips and Scott Silver and directed by Todd Phillips. Step 1, make a first Joker movie that angry incels love so much they make it their whole personality. Step 2, turn those angry incels against you by making a sequel comprised entirely of raspy old jazz standards and dreary, pointless nothingness. Step 3, make a 4th Hangover movie or some shit. 2 stars. Then I watched 2013's Under the Skin, written by Jonathan Glazer and Walter Campbell, and directed by Jonathan Glazer. This was the last of Jonathan Glazer's 4 films for me to see, and it's a lot more sedated than I expected. The inscrutability of the first 45 minutes definitely makes a first-time watch less enjoyable than a rewatch where things are clearer, but I really loved where it went in the second half. It's hard to say it's his bleakest film because, yeah. But man, that last act basically cries out against humanity, against fighting back against the system, all of it. Woof. 4 stars. Then I got a little freaky with 1932's Freaks, written by Willis Goldbeck and Leon Gordon and directed by Todd Browning. Being in a circus freak show means never having to say you're sorry, but it does mean having to say
Gooba gobble, gooba gobble, gooba gobble, gooba gobble.
This has been a big blind spot for me in classic horror, even though having now seen it, it's way more of a straight drama that zigs big time into some pretty inexplicable body horror in the last 5 minutes. While I liked how the stakes notched up in the last act, I connected most with the gentler parts following the lives of these performers and how they use their solidarity as a defense against the prejudice they face. 3.5 stars. Then, not quite live from New York, it's Saturday Night, written by Jason Reitman and Gail Kennan, and directed by Jason Reitman. As a perennial SNL apologist who loves ensemble films, it was going to be pretty hard for me to hate this, but shockingly I didn't fall head over heels with it either. It's too imprecise and unfocused to pull off the Birdman High Noon mashup it's aiming to be, but it's got heart for trying. It's dancing between a strong 3.5 stars to a weak 4 stars, but just because Cousin Greg pulled off playing both Andy Kaufman and Jim Henson, 4 stars. Next, a funky Polish musical, 2015's The Lure, written by Robert Bolesto and directed by Agnieszka Smaczynska. Finally, a mermaid film that dares you to rethink where a mermaid's vagina might be located. It's more charming than the grimy elements might let on at first, with the peppy songs and endearing performances blending together nicely with the world of the film. There are some pacing issues and muddy character intentions, and I wish there was a better actor in the male lead than Polish Lucas Gage, but pretty enjoyable overall. 3.5 stars. Then a Best Picture winner with 1942's Mrs. Miniver, written by Arthur Wimperis, George Froschel, James Hilton, and Claudine West, and directed by William Wyler. This veered a bit into territory that felt more World War II domestic fanfic than a true wartime drama, but I get it. You're making a film mid-World War II to rally the people back home in the UK, facing more and more incursions from the Germans. You're gonna bang that heightened melodramatic drum as hard as you need to. I honestly thought this was gonna descend into typical war drama stodginess after that opening, but it blossomed into something more rousing with meticulously carved out themes and some nice visuals. 4 stars. Then let's see those jazz hands, it's 1999's Trick, written by Jason Schaefer and directed by Jim Fall. Musicals are already admittedly pretty gay, but Trick thought about it and said, you know what? We can go gayer. Much gayer. The film follows a wannabe Broadway composer as he navigates a newfound interest in a go-go dancer he forms a connection with. If that wasn't enough, Tori Spelling pops in here and there to sing hammy show tunes. It's a really sweet and watchable film, even if it never moves beyond that territory to something greater. 3 stars. Then that better be a knife in your pocket, it's 2018's Knife+Heart, written by Jan Gonzalez and Cristiano Mangione, and directed by Jan Gonzalez. An erotic French slasher film with a score by M83 has been on my vision board for years, so when Sean Baker sang this film's praises, I pounced. Knife+Heart gives you a lot to ponder, but its main message is rooted in how passionate love is the truest horror in life. Once it's in you, driving you, you lose control over yourself. Giving into that kind of love can lead you down a destructive path, with reason and measure taking distant backseats to satisfaction and desire, and trying to repress it can force that passion to bubble up in unexpected ways. When Knife+Heart is really pumping, it's this seductive push and pull that draws the audience in and dazzles them with more than just the film's alluring aesthetics and charm. I gotta give this a rewatch sometime and unpack even more of what it has to offer, but 3.5 stars. Then Don't Call Him Dracula, it's 1922's Nosferatu, written by Henrik Green and directed by F.W. Murnau. I wanted to be sure and check this off my list before seeing Robert Eggers' new version, and for a more than century-old film, it's still got some charm and spice to it. I love it more as the inspiration for 2000's beguiling Shadow of the Vampire about the spooky making of the film starring Willem Dafoe as Nosferatu actor Max Schreck. Strongly recommend watching that after whatever Nosferatu incarnation you watch, but for 1922's Nosferatu, 3 stars. Next, Say Cheese, it's Smile 2, written and directed by Parker Finn. I wasn't clamoring for a sequel to 2022's Smile, but there's a good amount to be impressed by with this. Naomi Scott delivers one of the best lead performances in a studio horror film of the 2020s, cinematography has some nice moments to shine, and it makes even more out of the creepy smiling sequences than the original, particularly that nightmarish game of murder tag Naomi plays with her backup dancers. I liked the swing the ending took, and it opens things up to a definitely new direction, but if this is where the franchise stopped, I'd be fine with that too. 3.5 stars. Next, the play everyone did in high school, 1996's The Crucible, written by Arthur Miller and directed by Nicholas Heitner. The Crucible proves that maybe the real witchcraft and black magic were the hormones we ignored along the way. I thought this was a solid retelling of the play, particularly that Oscar-nominated screenplay by Arthur Miller himself. The film caught several phenomenal acting talents at the right time, from Winona to Daniel, and with the always great Joan Allen anchoring it all nicely. I maybe would have liked the film to use some cinematic elements the play didn't have at its disposal to toy a bit more with the audience's sense of what is truly going on in Salem, but I get how that would deviate from the source material a bit too much. Still, 4 stars. Next, some hijinks with 1944's Hail the Conquering Hero, written and directed by Preston Sturges. Outside of the slapstick greats, nobody injects as much energy and heart into their comedy as well as Preston Sturges. His direction always keeps the pace moving and the tone sincere, even in his less laugh-out-loud films like this one, which follows a soldier discharged from the military for his allergies who's mistaken for a war hero back in his hometown. I kept waiting for this to peter out once the mistaken identity plotline had run its course, but it never did. Props. 4 stars. Then I watched 2003's A Tale of Two Sisters, written and directed by Kim Ji-woon. I love a film that's one experience the first time you watch it and a totally different experience the second time because of how fundamentally your perspective changes knowing the story in full. A Tale of Two Sisters has some hefty twists sprinkled throughout the runtime, but what director Kim Ji-woon really twists for the audience is your emotional connection to the characters in the story. Everything you feel towards the characters in this gothic horror pressure cooker is valid, but by the end of the film, the bottom falls out of those feelings into new emotional territory that is so devilishly intriguing. It also toys with genre in a fun way that I wish more films dare to try. 4 stars. Next, it's Imaginary, written by Jeff Wadlow, Greg Orb, and Jason Ormland, and directed by Jeff Wadlow. I wish this one was just my imagination, but no, it exists, and when the scariest thing in your movie is the jerky syntax of a bear named Chauncey, you biffed it. 1.5 stars. Then the OG face-off, 1960s Eyes Without a Face, written by Pierre Boileau, Thomas Narcejac, Jean Redon, and Claude Sauté, and directed by Georges Franju. Nelson Mandela once said, if the eyes are the windows to the soul, then the face is the Halloween decorations you put on your lawn to make people wonder, oof, who lives in there? Georges Franju crafts a gloomy world of disintegrating identity and predatory jealousy that feels spiritually in tune with Coralie Farge's The Substance. There are moments of body horror, but for the most part, Eyes Without a Face leans more on vibes to unsettle the audience. If it wasn't so polite, I probably would have liked it even more, but still a solid 3.5 stars. Then, an Oscar-nominated animated film, Memoir of a Snail, written and directed by Adam Elliott. First, let me say Adam Elliott's style of animation isn't my cup of tea, so I'm much more tepid on this film than most people. Everyone around me in the theater was openly sobbing throughout, including a woman next to me who was deeply affected by a character saying snail trail and muttered snail trail aloud while she sobbed. I can't even begin to process that. 3 stars. Then some shadowy black and white thrills in 1946's The Spiral Staircase, written by Mel Donnelly and directed by Robert Siodmak. If you can look around a lot of water treading narratively, The Spiral Staircase nails the tone of a classic contained thriller. The best bits were when the mysterious killer eliminates a new victim with some nice camera work and enveloping shadows everywhere you look. It must have been a pretty weak year at the Oscars that year for Ethel Barrymore to snag an Oscar nom for sitting in bed and napping for an entire movie. 2.5 stars. Then I watched Woman of the Hour, written by Ian McDonald and directed by Anna Kendrick. First, there's not really enough to this true life story to sustain an entire thriller, and you can tell that from the real lack of a narrative arc and heavy emphasis on flashback sequences. But Anna Kendrick is a pretty good director, and she keeps things tense for the most part. Definitely not enough of a home run for Netflix to have paid as much as they did for it though. 3 stars. And I closed the month out back in the Lone Star State with 1974's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, written by Tobe Hooper and Kem Henkel and directed by Tobe Hooper. Sure, the guy doing rhythmic gymnastics with a chainsaw is scary, but I'll always be flop sweating more over the sea of tetanus and OSHA violations. This movie is such a cultural institution in cinema that it's hard to know where to begin in analyzing it, but one of my favorite bits of trivia that underscores just how much of a fluke this movie's success will always be is John Larroquette doing the opening narration and being paid with a marijuana joint. That's one of the most 70s things I can imagine and makes this movie eternally cool. 4 stars. Let me know in the comments, what are your thoughts on these movies, and the others I should check out? What emotions do the words snail trail evoke in you? Also stay tuned for other great commentary videos, reviews, video essays, and more. You can check me out on Letterboxd at Cineramadome24 or on TikTok at Film in the Blank. I appreciate you liking and subscribing. See you next time.